to click like, subscribe, the bell notification, and whatever else YouTube has you clicking on to support us.
Hello, and welcome to the newest episode of Tokunomics. Today I want to discuss the business strategy of Toei's Project Red. Now, I'm trying something different, so please let me know in the comments if this works or not, as this hasn't been done before by me, and I'm trying to take feedback and improve how I do these. So with our conversation today on Project Red, as I had promised a couple of weeks ago, this is going to be a discussion on their business strategy. So there's 5 things I want to highlight here. Hopefully you can see everything, but just to go through, the first thing is a one-stop strategy. I'll go into further detail about this. Second is multi-use. Global expansion is 3rd, modernization is 4th, and targeted content labels is 5th. These are very high impact areas when it comes to a business strategy, and these are actually good strategies to have, and they actually made it very public facing, surprisingly, what their strategy is. Now, does this mean they're succeeding in their business strategy? Does it mean that they're getting their point across appropriately? Yes and no. And I'll kind of give some highlights from the gossip columns that Kaiji Okami shares with me every now and then, because if you didn't know anything about my lovely husband, he is a gossipy bitch. And I say that with all love in my heart because I don't do drama, but I like to hear about drama. So with that said, let's go in a little bit further about Toei's Project Red. Now, I apologize in advance. I did put all of my notes on my phone to make it a little bit easier. So, an important thing to know about this business model is they are looking to build, starting this year in 2026, a 500 billion yen global brand by 2033. So, within the next for 7 years, they're looking to build this brand by expanding on the typical formula of Super Sentai and Kamen Rider, and have Kamen Rider be its own entity, and building upon that, well, building upon other aspects of the business, be it taking elements of Super Sentai, taking elements of Kamen Rider and Metal Heroes, and everything else that they have done over the past 50 years. Now, they have done things beyond 50 years, but that's what I'm going to focus on for the most part. So the first thing to know about for a business strategy / business plan, both can be one and the same. A business plan contains a business strategy, but a business strategy is not fully a business plan. A business plan is going to look at all of the elements, such as the cost. It's going to look at the focus on where it wants to go. As I just read from their key statement, they want to build this into a 500 billion yen global empire in the next 7 years. Business strategy is what an organization uses, both large and small. Actually, each year I help Kaiju build out a business plan / strategy of what he wants to do for Creativity by Design. So it's something that every business, every entity should do. Do they do it? Depends. And I say that because the bigger the business, the more consistent they are with the strategy. Doesn't mean it's always right, but they are consistent with it. The smaller the organization, such as like a sole proprietorship or an LLC or a small nonprofit or a small corporation, may not formalize it to the level of degree of a multi-billion-dollar company. And that's because they either don't need it, they have a sole focus and that's what they're doing, or they're not looking to grow. They're not looking to expand. Most businesses should be looking to grow and expand and try new things, but it doesn't mean that they always will. Now, business strategies are ever evolving. So these 5 items that I have here, any of these can stop and start at multiple times throughout the process. And that's because a business strategy has to evolve. A business plan is very black and white, i.e. my nails, but a business strategy is going to have a lot of gray areas, because when they put together an initial strategy, as they did, somewhat haphazardly in my opinion, but that doesn't mean it's totally haphazardly. But when they put together a plan, figuratively, the strategy is the initial starting point of what they are going to accomplish, of how they're going to accomplish it. A business strategy, though, can change quarterly, biannually, or every year, because there are things that may take center stage versus things that are going to fall to the wayside if it's not working, such as targeted content labels. This is a huge strategy. Hopefully you can see this on the bottom. Sorry about that. Once again, new. Whereas modernization, I personally think should be at the top of this list. But let's go into each one of these, because there's a lot to unpack with these 5. And I'm not going to make this a 2-hour meeting, video, whatever that you want to think of it as. I'm going to try to keep this in the confines of what you would normally have in a college course. So hopefully about 50 minutes. But let's go into this one-stop strategy. So when you think about a one-stop strategy, it is having all elements go into this one place. So rather than having 5 to 10 different entities, I'm going to use, I'm going to use Dragon Ball for this, just the Dragon Ball universe as a quick aside. So there was a time when you had the, Dragon Ball Z, not abridged, the actual official show of it, I can't remember what it was called, where they would remove all of the filler episodes from the Dragon Ball Z series while they were also preparing supers. So you had multiple Dragon Ball things going on animation wise, plus you still had the movies, so you had a lot going on. That's not necessarily a one-stop source. That's a multi-stop strategy. You can even think about this with cookie brands, using Oreo for example. Oreo cookies have multiple types. You have the regular Oreos, you have double stuffed, you have mega stuffed now, you also have gluten-free, you have birthday cake, you have peanut butter, you have red velvet, all of these different kinds. That is a multi-stop because they are looking to target different groups at the same time. One-stop strategy means they're going to still target different groups, but they're all going to do it within one entity, be it whatever show they have. Currently we have Galvan Infinity, which is their first series under the Project Red logo, and with this it is a one-stop because the show is to capitalize on multiple things. First, you're capitalizing on nostalgia because you have the element of Gavan, Space Sheriff Gavan. Then you have the modernization because this is a new Gavan. It's not the revival of the original Gavan that you had in the earlier 2000s, where they basically did the same Gavan character, but with a new person, so to speak. This is taking it fully new and utilizing that. So when you think of an integrated one-stop shop, they maintain control also of how they're going to put it together. So all of the marketing, all of the planning is going to come under Project Red. So that first and foremost is that one-stop strategy. All of it is going to target this. So that means figuratively, and I have not seen the toy packaging, and I have to take a look at this, but the expectation is all the marketing, everything is going to have Project Red somewhere within that. It also ensures that they manage the entire life cycle of any show. So versus Kamen Rider and Super Sentai, where they were two holistic entities. Now you have Kamen Rider and Project Red. So Kamen Rider is going to change into a different way. There are some conversations about it may even being a little bit more adult-oriented to go back to the basics of what it originally was. Whereas Project Red is going to be this one-stop strategy going into multi-use of everything is going to be under Project Red. All the casting, all the stories. There is going to be a consistent team so you can focus on the marketing. You can focus on the narrative. It's all Project Red. And that is a huge undertaking because when you think of any kind of IP, you have to ensure that there's consistent branding in what you're doing. Everything should have the term Project Red involved. So even though it's called Gavan Infinity, I know that's not the full name, but Gavan Infinity, it's Project Red, technically Gavan Infinity. Even though that's not a part of its title, it is a part of the marketing scheme for it. Now, when we get into this multi-use, one of the things that has been talked about with Project Red is that you can have it be in different phases of process. So toys, merchandising, games, theatrical films, events. So multi-use means that you can take this show, somewhat similar to what they've done with Super Sentai over the decades, same thing with Kamen Rider and Ultraman. You can take one single show and turn it into a multitude of different things. You can also make it multi-use because of the fact that it is one stop and one source, Project Red, and have so many different things housed under it. Think of it as a pyramid. At the top is Project Red. So trying this, so apologies if you see my funky pants, but you think of a pyramid here, and hopefully you can see this. This is my great drawing because I didn't go to school for art. At the top here, and this is used a lot in business, but at the top is Project Red. It doesn't matter what show it is, it's always going to be Project Red. Here then, you then have the TV show or movies. The next stage for this multi-use is going to be marketing. This is how you're going to sell the show. This is not actually what you're producing, but how you're going to sell it. Then you go further down, you're going to have branding. Branding is a part of marketing, but it can be very different because branding is where you think of marketing as selling, branding is how you're going to make it look on everything. Then you have toys, and I could just put this in here with my great handwriting. And then last but not least, the audience, because if you think about from a pyramid type metric, this is supposed to be the smallest because this is the focal point, the one-stop strategy. And when you get to the audience, you can see everything gets a little bit bigger, 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 bigger. Now, marketing and TV shows could definitely be reversed if you wanted it to, but that's really how it's going for this particular strategy. Now, when you think about this strategy as it is, when you think about all the uses one stop has. Now, going back to the Dragon Ball aspects, they have multi-stop because not everything is related to the same thing, because Supers was a continuation of Z, whereas you have oh God, I can't remember its name. I'm gonna remember it immediately after I stop recording. The abridged version of Dragon Ball Z is a different stop. And the reason for that is because you have different types of audiences you're catering to. So when you think about it for Dragon Ball, you're going to have your core, which is the people who like the original. And then you have your new, which is the abridged, if I can spell. Now, you could think of these as one stop as well because they're all for the same franchise, but they are very different stops. Same thing with Oreos. You have different brands. Now, this is all going to be the same thing. It's always going to be Project Red. What is under the umbrella of Project Red? It's going to be those TV shows and movies, which is going to affect marketing. Because these two parts of that pyramid can go hand in hand. And then with the branding after, it is going to be Project Red focused, but it's going to be whatever that particular TV show and or movie was. And that's where you go down. Now, I did miss one here, I noticed. I think I made too many. This will be, you can think of like food, events, anything of the like. So other things that come along with it. So there's multiple uses that you're going to have from one stop strategy. Another great example of a one-stop strategy, if you will, is actually the MCU. When they originally started. The MCU at their original inception, where they really planned to do this multi-universe, the one-stop strategy was the MCU of the Avengers, of this multi-part story where each part led into this big over-the-top movie. Now, as the MCU got bigger and bigger and bigger, that one-stop strategy didn't work as well because of the fact that it got too much and overwhelmed the audience with, going back here, your marketing, your TV shows and movies, the branding, all the things that you could obtain, that the audience actually thinned out. So this pyramid actually became much thinner. That caused a lot of effects for their continuous branding, which is why you've seen a lot of movies get canceled. You've seen a lot of TV shows get scrapped. You've seen so many things happen where throwing too many darts at the dartboard was not working in a one-stop strategy, that they had to come back to the fold and rethink what they're trying to do, which is the challenge with a one-stop strategy. It's not the greatest idea, but it can work if you think about it. Now, going to global expansion. This is a hefty initiative that I do feel is going to slightly bite Toei in the end. And the reasoning for that is fans didn't come, like international fans did not come to these shows with the expectation that they were going to cater to them. So, for example, American fans. American fans did not plan for these shows to be a part of their culture, a part of their narrative. They enjoyed them because of the fact that it was that form of escapism, and you got to learn subtle differences between cultural narratives. Plus, if we wanted a show that assumptively reflected our particular culture as Americans, for example, we had Power Rangers, we had Beetleborgs, VR Troopers, and so many other shows that were taken, even anime-wise, with the original Sailor Moon as well, with shows that were taken from Japan, adjusted, reshot, or simplified to cater to different audiences. Now, with this global expansion, by having this element of inclusivity of different cultures, can work in their favor to a degree because it will build new audiences, but at the same time it can work negatively for them because they have to remember their core audience. They have to remember their Japanese audiences. They're the ones that started this. They're the ones that tuned in for all of those decades before international audiences really got clued in, so to speak. And we saw that kind of with Zets with the second opening song. Now, it may have been intentional, it may have been unintentional, but they did receive a lot of feedback from Japanese fans that they didn't like the opening theme song, which, if you talk to other international fans, they love the initial theme song for the show because it kind of gave them the feel of something they enjoy. Now, with the new theme song, it is tracking better with Japanese fans, and now the question is it still tracking as well with international fans? The simple answer should be a resounding yes, that international fans are going to like this new theme song because it does kind of fit the scope of what you hear in a lot of current anime as well. So global expansion is a positive because that means as Americans, Europeans, other Asian countries, South America, as well as every other continent, rather than naming them all, Africa and Australia, they will get more content of tokusatsu than they may have never gotten before. Now, admittedly, when we hear the term global expansion, when it comes to shows, usually it's more so coming to the US for some odd reason, because there are a number of other countries that have access to tokusatsu in its original form, more so in East Asia, as well as Australia, but there are places in South America that have access to it and things like that. So globalization usually means more of the American or North America and Western European countries. But it could be a good thing or a bad thing, and it's still yet to be seen. Modernization. So this is another element of their business strategy that I see where they're going with it. And I understand their perspective because for many years, even with a lot of the newer Super Sentais, they were using formulas that were tried and true, that have been around for decades, and because they worked. But now that the world is having a smaller population, especially in Japan, there is a decrease in the birth rate, a decrease in their birth rate, which is also happening here in the United States, that you now have to adapt and evolve your storytelling narrative, because what may have worked in the 80s, 90s, and earlier 2000s are not necessarily going to work today because of the fact that there are not enough children watching these shows, either due to birth rate or changing of personal habits and preferences. There's so much competition out there that you have to do a spectacle to get them. So rather than solely focusing on children, you now have to figure out, okay, do I cater more to the 12 to 21 demographic, the teenagers to early adults? Or do I go from the 22 to 35 demographic where I get true adults, younger adults to not middle age, but a little bit older in their lives? Or do I go with older adults, 35 or 36 pluses? You have to think about that. And modernization means that you have to think about those modern storytelling techniques, because if you're trying to just cater to children, as the adage for a lot of tokusatsu is, oh, these are kid shows. But if kids are not watching, you need to figure out who is watching and how to ensure you gravitate towards them. One thing that Doctor Who did for a number of years, which was a very smart strategy, is at times they would air during family time, so that essentially, usually after dinner time or before bedtime for the youngers and things like that, they would air Doctor Who. Or even in America, we would air those family sitcoms, because that way you collected everyone. Because once upon a time, families sat around and watched TV together. I did it whenever I was at my friends' houses, because my parents and I never had cable all the time, so we didn't do all of that. But we did sit around and watch TV together. I did it with my grandparents a lot. I did it at my friends' houses when their parents were around. So it's that multi-generational time, which is where modernization comes in. It is taking that thought process of what worked in the past, it does not necessarily work now, which is once again why Kamen Rider is going a little bit more teen, adult trends rather than too childish, because it's trying to re-engage or engage those older audiences that may have watched it when they were kids but are not wanting to watch a kids show. Then the last thing is targeted content labels. So with targeted content labels, we actually saw this most recently with Kamen Rider, and these are part of the Project Red scope as well. But these are something to really think about when you have Kamen Rider Animated, you have Kamen Rider Premium. You are going to have multiple items, which is sometimes where you can take this diagram, I'll just stick that up there, where you can take with this diagram and you can actually reverse branding with TV shows. So versus having TV shows be the forefront, you're going to put branding up here, because that's where you're going to start figuring out what you want to do with your brands and do with your marketing, and then make the television shows down here, because your branding is where you need to think about where you want to go. What are all of these multi-sources, multi-uses going to be? So you're thinking about, okay, how do I want to brand out for the future? Which is when you came out with those content labels about all the different things they're going to start doing. Because then, after they develop the branding, then develop the marketing, is where they have to develop that content. So content is huge right now, because you have online content, you have streaming content, you have television airplay, live television content, and then you have theaters. And being that you have so many content streams, you have to figure out what's going to go where. And sometimes with branding, earlier in the process, you can then decide how you want the TV shows, movies, and any other content to work. So that's why I said a business strategy can constantly always change, because where before this was very simple of Project Red, and sorry if you can't see my red marker, but then you are changing up how you're going to do things, because toys may end up going higher there because you want to make sure that you're making the right toys, where food and events could go lower because of the fact that they're not going to work. Now, this can always also be a reverse pyramid. Now, a reverse pyramid is going to change up the strategy a little bit with this, because when you do a reverse pyramid, and if we did this for Project Red, this can also show you where it's supposed to go. So with Project Red, this would be, if we looked at what we're talking about today about the one-stop strategy, the multi-use of that one stop, you're going to have, where it should be is truthfully here, marketing and branding should be at the top in the biggest thing, because this is going to cost the most money. Because in this stage of the process, for a smart strategy to work for Project Red, this is where they need to set all of their, a high majority of their money, because of the fact that you need to figure out what is going to attract people. One of the flaws they have today from the gossip columns that Kaiju had shared with me is that Japanese audiences are actually under the impression, based on the lack of communication or how it was presented, that Project Red is just a revival of Metal Heroes, which I think we talked about in previous videos. If not, I know I've talked about with Kaiju a lot. And the challenge is, if you don't have good branding at the start, no matter what you do, people are going to think different things, just like how we thought that, or how a lot of people thought, that Super Sentai being on hiatus meant that it was going to be coming back. That was going to be coming back quickly, where I had to explain in a prior video on business terms that hiatus doesn't mean return. It doesn't mean that a pause button was set. It means that in business terms, it's been ended. A nice way of saying canceled. So with that in mind, the majority of your money is going to be spent here. And why I say it like that, because everything else does cost money. You don't make money from marketing and branding. You never make money in marketing and branding. It's the results of your marketing and branding that makes you money. And the result is, here we have TV, movies, and I'm going to put events here, because Japan needs to do more live events like they've been notorious for doing to really get this going. Because if you have TV, movies, and events, this is what people are going to tune in to based on your marketing. And right now, people are not, I don't have the official numbers because that won't be released until the end of the show, after the show has concluded for Go-FundMe Infinity. But one thing that has been seen from a lot of online discourse and conversations is that people are not tuning into the movies or TV show at the moment. They had a significant drop off after the first couple of episodes. So your movies have to really build up the momentum again, and events are huge in Japan for talking about their shows, for selling their shows, to use marketing to sell tickets for these shows. And these shows are a way to get people to watch a TV show, to watch any online content, and go to the movies. So these all are in a circular pattern. You'll usually see something like this where you have arrows going around in a circle, because these three should be working together in that circle where it's going round and round and round to work together. The next thing that's so important here are toys. Toys are key to selling a show. Now, one of the challenges is if you go to older audiences may not buy the day-to-day toys because that's not a part of their budget. That's not a part of their lifestyle. Whereas where you're going to connect kids is buying toys. The toy sales for Go-FundMe Infinity so far have been fairly low. that has been due to the fact that the toys are really not appealing to kids. They don't have a lot of toys outside of where I was joking during our last live stream, calling the mech a Mr. Potato Head, or a potato head toy, because the core was the same, but all the little pieces and products could be moved around, set upon them. So you just take off one, snap on another. So that's where toys are key. Next up is going to be any other merch. So this is going to be your food products. It's going to be any of those things, like even my cup here that has Wednesday Addams. This is how you sell your topic, be it Addams Family here, or if you think about how you want to brand it to get people involved. Pepsi has done it for a number of years. Now it doesn't have it on this because it's a multi-pack, but whenever there's like a big movie coming out or a big cartoon or anything like that, like Star Wars for many years would use Pepsi or Coca-Cola to sell their brand. So you would see, instead of Pepsi fully, you would see something with the logo of wherever they're trying to appeal to. That's the merch aspect of the strategy. And then lastly, in this reverse pyramid here, is once again, always your audience. Who are you trying to connect to? So this funnel, this reverse strategy, which I personally think is a better of the two, but is the way that you engage your audience. Like everything should always point to who you want to target. And that could be modernization, where you are trying to appeal to multiple cultures, multiple narratives. However, the one flaw and drawback about globalization is the alienation piece of it. If you alienate who gave you this opportunity, then you lose so much momentum, because it's not just that culture or those people who are going to alienate or who are going to tune you out. It can also be those other cultures, such as like the Americans, Europeans, or whomever, because they didn't tune into a particular franchise because it catered to them. They tuned into it because it demonstrated great storytelling and perspective. And many times at this stage of marketing and branding, they forget about this. So when you think about a strategy, this is how I'm going to put it for conclusion of today. This is how their strategy really appears right now. Project Red at the top, marketing, TV shows, and branding are all kind of interjumbled. You can rotate any of the three where you want. Toys are huge. And then their biggest thing is the audience. So they're making Project Red small, making the audience huge, because their expectation is they want to carve a piece in all audiences and connect with all people, no matter the age group, the locale, or anything like that. Whereas to have an effective strategy, that's where you really need to go to a reverse pyramid like this, where you narrow down your audience, be it on age group, be it on culture, or anything like that. Yes, they do need to open up their culture. They do need to share what they have done, Toei, for tokusatsu, with the rest of the world. There is no argument, ifs, ands, and buts about that. That is huge for growth and huge for our globalized world, because everything goes everywhere. And they have lost significant amounts of money by not doing so, because many of us, right or wrong, whatever, have found alternative means to watch tokusatsu. Rather than having access to it easily in the United States or Europe, South America, wherever you are, we've had to be creative in accessing it. If they globalize, then they'd have a great chance of being able to give access to everybody. It doesn't mean catering. It just means access. And that's what they need to think about in their marketing and branding. How are they going to make it accessible and interesting, but not alienate? That's why their TV shows, movies, and events, I think it would be great to utilize even our American convention formats. We have some Power Rangers conventions, some conventions where Super Sentai actors and actresses go. But if they could build more interest and events there, that could significantly expand and enhance on it too. Especially if you take actors and actresses who have been in Super Sentai but have done other things, such as blockbuster movies that have appeared internationally, or have done anime voices, so you can kind of start building it 2 for 1. And then once they know more about what they have done else outside of whatever thing, such as including tokusatsu, it can build that. Then they also need to think about toys. Are toys the central format anymore, like they were many years ago, knowing that the economies of our world are significantly changed? Should toys, even though it is the backbone of it, should they have that center stage? Should they be a little bit more creative with it versus doing regular day-to-day toys? Should they make more collector's pieces? Things like that. And that's where merch, I think, needs to come in. That's where Bandai can take advantage of the merch aspect, because people like wearing t-shirts, or even as I stood up the one time, if you could see it, actually you can't, I have Terrifier pants on. I love Art the Clown. So everything happens, and they should be looked at, because with a strategy such as this, you need to think about how you're going to make this one-stop work, how you're going to make multi-use effective, how you're going to globalize, keep modernization forefront. Don't just use tropes because they worked for the last 30 years. Know that not all tropes are going to work forever. And really being that type of group that leans into change, that leans into doing something different and new. And finally, if you're going to use targeted content labels, make sure they make sense to the audiences that you want them to tune into. And be intentional with your targeted campaigns, because if you throw too much at the world, people aren't going to tune into anything because they don't know what to tune into. And that is a huge flaw of any business, is you give people too many options, they then don't take advantage of any of them. Because human minds, when you get overwhelmed, walk away from everything, and that's natural for anyone and everyone. That too much intimidates and brings a fear response, and we run away from it. So we won't do anything. If we had the choice between something or nothing, the human methodology for anything large and small sometimes is to do nothing, because it's that risk versus reward. And sometimes you do have to take risks, but you have to think intentional. So with that said, the business strategy for Project Red is working to a degree. It needs to do a lot better. It needs to connect with their audiences without making it feel like it's a gut punch for those that love Super Sentai, that were affected and saddened when it went away. And then for everybody else who is seeing something new, building up that excitement, but being receptive to feedback and concerns that come along. I really hope, with the feedback that has been coming in from everybody across the world who's watched Gavan Infinity, that they're listening to that feedback and really taking it to heart. But with that said, let me know what you thought of this new format. Did this help to have something as a reference? Did it help me doing my really, really bad artistic projects? Definitely let me know. I'm trying to incorporate things that can help better explain the process than just words based on feedback. And if there's things I can improve from this method, let me know. But as always, thank you for tuning in, and hopefully you enjoyed this episode of Tokunomics. Bye!